this is a great episode that we're about to have, and I want to introduce Jim Schmidt. Jim, I appreciate you being here. I think there's probably a lot of people that are going to be watching this that know who you are, but there may be some that don't. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and let us know why we should know you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. I'm Jim Schmidt. Like you said, I'm the stepfather of Gabby Petito. I'm also a board member on the Gabby Petito Foundation. For those who are unfamiliar with Gabby, she was tragically murdered by her boyfriend, strangled to death. And it was a case that kind of made worldwide attention. And after that, we realized that there were things we had to do as a family to help others so this wouldn't happen again. And that's where the foundation came from. And for me, I've worked in the fire service for 25 years, and that's been my world. And I've come across that fire and EMS providers really don't get any domestic violence training. And through the course of my research, I came across in a webinar one day what you all have going on down here in Burleson and your response to domestic violence called specifically strangulation. And when I saw what was going on down here, I thought this was unbelievable. I said, I have to meet these people and talk more about what you have going on here and learn more, because I think it's something great to take across the country and really be the example of how to respond to those incidents.
Well, that's awesome. And we really appreciate, number one, you being here, reaching out to us. Tell us a little bit about what's the foundation doing at this part, and really how did you find out about Burleson and his strangulation ordinance?
So the foundation, when we started almost immediately after we lost Gabby. We noticed that the same social media sites that we were using to try to locate and find her, we began receiving a lot of messages on our site from people saying that they followed the story, they saw it, or they recognized that they were in a similar situation and they were able to find safety and get out, and how Gabby's story had touched so many lives. So we felt compelled to not sit back, but to be proactive and go out there and try to help educate people and try to help as many people as we can. And so on the domestic violence side of it, we really started out as supporting other domestic violence organizations who have specialty care and direct services to victims and survivors. And then we kind of come to the realization that there's kind of a gap in prevention and education, and that there was a need for it, specifically with like first responders, and trying to get more training out to them to better respond to these situations. So we started to develop programs for first responders and the community in general to try and get them to understand more of the dynamics of that. We also work with missing persons. We're trying to bring some more awareness to those situations on how many people go missing and the disparities in who gets attention, who doesn't get attention in the media,
right?
And try to change that narrative. And as I said, through that work, it's brought me to a lot of great organizations that specialize in that work. And there was a webinar, I believe it was back in December or January. I can't remember the month.
Yeah, I think it was January, actually. I went back and looked for it.
Blend together, and it was on this organization out of Texas, out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And by the way, this is like my fourth or fifth time coming to the Dallas area, and I absolutely love this area.
That's
It's
awesome.
amazing. Other than the fact, I think we had like a tornado warning or something while I was here.
That's pretty much a weekly thing around here. So yeah.
And even as a New York Giants fan, being in the home.
It's like they're killing me this season. So I don't know which one of us is working the hardest to be on the bottom of the NFC East.
Yeah, we're doing a pretty good job. So, but I came across in that webinar was what the City of Burleson Police Department and Fire Rescue here have done as a response to non-lethal strangulation, and how they're responding to these incidents, and just a lot of the stuff that I've been looking for out there to try to find good programs to bring forward to other areas that aren't doing anything, or good data sets to prove why this is needed. Like couldn't find it anywhere.
Right.
And then to see you have it right here, and it's been implemented for a while now, and they're starting to see the benefits of having this training and this coordination to responding to these incidents. And so I reached out to the fire chief, to Casey, and we set up this meeting, and like, you sure you want to come do this in person? I'm like, heck yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm a boots on the ground type of guy. Like I want to come face to face and talk and ask questions and hear from the people on the street that are actually the ones that are implementing this ordinance and what their thoughts are. And I think we got a lot of that accomplished while I was here.
That's great. And, of course, the star of the show is with us today, Chief Billy Cordell. Chief, walk us through how this ordinance came about, because I know this has been something that you've been passionate about. You're working hard on still today, and it's been a long process. But give people that don't even understand that are citizens of Burleson what our ordinance states about strangulation.
All right. Well, first and foremost, Jim, thank you for being here and listening to our story, and us getting to listen to your story, and putting this video together to kind of highlight what we do in Burleson, but also, the lack of a coordinated response between EMS and police and emergency departments and hospitals and forensic nurses. When you look at the criminal justice system, it's a huge component. But, trying to get together with everybody and working on the same page
right
is what it's about. So to answer your question, former mayor of Burleson was a guy named Ken Shetter. He is the executive director of One Safe Place, which is a family justice center in Tarrant County. And he's dedicated his life to helping victims of domestic violence. And so somewhere along in the end of 2017, he went to a training conference where the Training Institute for Strangulation Prevention was presenting, and he ended that conference on Friday, and he immediately called me and said, "Man, I just went to the most phenomenal training I've ever been to." And he said, it was on intimate partner violence, and it focused on strangulation. He said, we've got to come up with a way to do something, not just keep responding to these calls, but to actually look at proactive stances and how we can better serve our community, better serve the survivors of non-fatal strangulation. So we ended that conversation. I said, let me go and do some research on it. So I pulled data from the International Association's Chiefs of Police, IACP, and what we learned was in the 121st session, IACP had passed a resolution and written a white paper that said, law enforcement has never been trained. We haven't had the specialty training to recognize the signs and symptoms of non-fatal strangulation, and that we need to do a better job. But it contained a toolkit in there of, kind of guiding your path. Then I went to the Training Institute's website and I started pulling the information and the data from there, and I was just overwhelmed with the statistics are overwhelming, and we can sit here and quote statistics all day long, but they also had a toolkit. So, as I'm going through and doing some preliminary research on this, I called him back and we met again, and we said, okay, what's our path on this? And we talked about policy, and we talked about ordinance. So in policy, we did not go that route because that doesn't extend to other entities. My policy is my policy. It's, next chief comes in, can change it with a pen.
And explain what a policy is for somebody that's not in the government.
Yeah, and our policies are the directives of how we respond in certain circumstances and what we do, and what our protocols are for our officers responding to whatever type of call we're going to.
Gotcha.
And they're the written directives that give them the guidelines, if you will, of how to respond. So we looked at that and we started talking about an ordinance and said, if we do an ordinance, we can memorialize this, but we can also, further and really important is this lives on beyond any change in leadership within the city, within the fire service, within the policing. And we decided that was the route we wanted to go. Well, one of the things I wanted to do, because as I started this conversation with that, this is a piece of a much larger goal in getting a lot of people on the same page and coordinated response to this. So we formed a multidisciplinary team, and so we brought in the fire and representatives from fire department. We brought in the police department and representatives. We brought in district attorneys from both Tarrant. We're in two counties, Tarrant and Johnson County, and we brought this multidisciplinary team together to look at and say, okay, how do we do this as a team going forward? So that's the crux of the ordinance. We went and we passed the ordinance, and the ordinance is really a pretty simple ordinance, but it is aimed at helping educate, getting the medical attention that somebody that's suffered strangulation offense because of the lethality of that. It's getting that medical attention to them, but it's also educating them. So the ordinance is simple, and it says that when we respond to a domestic violence or intimate partner violence situation, when we ask the right questions, which that was part of the toolkit, we've got to ask these questions, and we find out that strangulation is an element of that offense, then we, by ordinance, will call the medical staff to come out and meet with, do an assessment on the patient, talk to them, what signs and symptoms they're having, and then, try to get them to go to the hospital. But it's really, the ordinance is very simple. It is, we are required to contact medical to come out and provide treatment to a person that suffered non-fatal strangulation on the scene.
So with a policy, it's a guideline. With a ordinance, it's a directive. Now, isn't that difficult, because it sounds like implementing an ordinance kind of works against you almost in a certain fact, because if your officers go out on scene, they're required to do this, not, well, the guideline kind of says this, but we kind of did, and the ordinance dictates you have to do this.
Correct.
And there's probably some sort of disciplinary if you don't follow your own ordinance.
Well, that's aimed at me.
Okay.
So I've got a...
Sorry, Chief, didn't mean to bring that up. That just...
it is odd going and passing an ordinance that's against yourself. But we believe in what we're doing. We believe in the data. We believe in helping, these victims that, for years have suffered strangulation. And, while there's a lot of research that's out there, but there's a lot of research to be done. But, in Burleson, we just, we took this and we passed this ordinance. So when you said it's been a little while in the making, we passed it on February 19th, 2018.
Oh, wow.
And, we started looking at our data ahead of the ordinance. The ordinance also includes specific training. So we ran all of our police officers, our communications team, as well as the firefighters through that training. And, in doing that, it was aimed at asking the right questions, getting specific with those questions and what happened, and then the educational component of that, as well as providing service for them. So we provide information on resources. If you can reach out and call these organizations that are advocates and get help and services there, whether it's counseling, whatever it is, but also really encourage them to go and see their medical professional, and their personal doctor and emergency department, because there is a lethality of this that can you may not be showing signs and symptoms today, but months down the road, this can come back to haunt you. And I know, Jim, you can speak to that as well. And it's just, it's, the data is out there, and it's compelling. And but even with all of that compelling data, we've got to get more law enforcement, more fire service, more doctors and nurses involved in this, because it's going to take every one of us to be able to hold that offender accountable.
And Jim, with you being in the fire industry for so long, you were a captain, right? Correct. Yeah. Between that and the foundation, do you see going around the nation talking about these things and looking into and trying to study this? Do you see a lot of municipalities or organizations that have committed to some sort of ordinance like this, or some sort of extensive training for their fire or their law enforcement?
I haven't seen too many like this where it's so coordinated. It's in as a city ordinance. I mean, there might be more out there, so I don't want to misspeak in any way.
Right.
But a majority of them are not, and some of them are doing some DV awareness training, some localized training. There's only really 2 states that I know that require their fire and EMS providers are mandated to have domestic violence training, and that's Kentucky and Tennessee. But otherwise, the rest of the country, not really. And when I've been going around and speaking to some of these agencies, and we start talking about it and discussing these facts and these subtle signs that a person who's been strangled may have, but the potential long-term severe effects that they have that could be fatal.
Right.
And we start talking more and more about it. It's like a light bulb goes off in their head, and they're like, man, why aren't we doing this? Or why are we only finding out about this now? And they want to have more training, and they want to have a better understanding. And I have not seen to the extent that you have here. And then, just today and yesterday, speaking to the guys and girls on the ground that are out there doing it and getting their feedback is unbelievable.
Right.
A lot of great feedback from them. And I think this afternoon we had a couple of great questions that came back our way. And just looking to strengthen that response, because they see the need for it. they're out there seeing it anyway.
Right.
They're responding to it, or they're responding to it and not realizing the severity of what they're actually looking at. But once they get that knowledge, it really opens up their eyes.
So you think there are times where they're going out on scene, maybe for a call that's not domestic violence per se. They show up on site and they're not, because they don't have the training. I mean, you only know what you know. They get to this site and there's so many signs that they're not recognizing that they could have helped remove somebody from a situation like that, or at least try to get them the help that they needed before something like this turns into a horrible situation.
Yeah, they had said that today, a lot of the firefighters that we had spoken to, because oftentimes the call that they receive is not exactly what they show up to.
Right.
So it might come in as injuries from a fall, and when they get there, the story that they're being told doesn't necessarily match the injuries that they see, or they're picking up on a different vibe on the scene that just doesn't seem right. Maybe the patient that they responded to is kind of being dismissive with their responses, or
Right.
kind of not making eye contact, or looking at somebody else in the room before they answer a question, just certain cues. And beforehand, you might not have picked up on it, but once you start to receive that training and understand the dynamics of how a survivor is going to be behaving, and then how an abuser is going to be behaving, and starting to have an overall idea of the scene and what's
Right.
going on, you can kind of all of a sudden figure out, hey, I got to do something different here. Maybe I need to separate these two. And then, you bring law enforcement in, if they're not on scene yet, and then you start working together, and then asking those right questions. You might then start to get those responses and find out it's a lot worse than you really thought, or it's not exactly what you thought you were responding to.
Right.
And from there, they can start linking them to services directly and start building that safety plan, either getting them to the hospital if they need some diagnostic testing, or law enforcement can now go in, make an arrest, start working with, the local DV agency with this person, and get
Right.
them on that safe path, versus we missed it and we come back a second or a third time, but now there's a fatal result because we didn't recognize something the last time we were here.
And Chief, we train our officers in this to recognize these types of things when they show up on scene. And I assume sometimes our fire department goes out to a call, just like Jim's saying, on a call that's not a DV call. It's whatever it may be. They may recognize a sign. Do they? How does that work with us? I mean, do they call us right off the bat? I mean, how do we work in conjunction with our fire department?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and the simple answer is yes. We want them to okay, something's not right here, and that's what we're trying to really instill in them, is to go out here and think of something that is this plausible? What happened? That they fell? Is it? Are the injuries consistent with what they said? And, you're going to start seeing red flags on that. And that's what we're trying to teach, to see the red flags. As a result of a lot of research that we have recently done, we're going to go back in and we're going to set up some new training protocols and retrain all of our officers. We have a lot of newer officers here, as did the fire department. So go back in and train everyone so that we're all on the same page, and really spend a lot of time talking about the why this is important. Because we can go out and do the what's and the hows, and we can hit those check boxes all day long. But when you help them, and we saw that today with within our officers when we met with them and the firefighters, is that they do understand the importance of this. And that's the first battle to get across. And we saw that in their responses today. But some of the things that we've learned of recent, and then talking with everyone today, is what we need to be doing is cross-training. The fire department set up their training guidelines. We set up our training guidelines, and we're trained, and everybody goes out and does their job. And what we got to get out is that we got to get away from that silo and get into where we are cross-trained. And then we extend that. And I've been doing a lot more research, and I met with some forensic nurses from John Peter Smith Hospital in Fort Worth, and there's expert witnesses and things. And really kind of put a package together, because so many, unfortunately, but, so many of our survivors, they will recant or they refuse to cooperate in the investigation piece of that. And, a lot of it is we're trying to get help to them. We're trying to educate them, but we're also trying to hold this offender accountable. When you get to strangulation, the research says strangulation is an escalation. And once you have strangled, when that victim is at high risk, there's a 750% increase in your chances of becoming the victim of a homicide, and that is staggering numbers.
Right.
So when you go back in and you start putting all these pieces together, we need to package our cases so that we do not have to depend on that testimony from that survivor. For whatever reason they choose to not cooperate, that's their decision.
Right.
But we still need to be able to proceed with case. And we just recently got a conviction on a non-cooperative victim, but we had packaged this case together well enough that they went ahead as a prosecuting attorney and took this forward and got a conviction. But we have to think differently in how we're doing that, and that's what some of the new training is going to provide.
Right.
But us working side by side with our fire partners, I mean that just makes us a lot stronger. We can educate them on the police side for safety reasons for them, but also help them understand, okay, that meant something over to the police side. And then we can learn on the fire side, and working together, we're just going to be a lot better at what we do.
So what you're saying on that conviction, the person that was choking was convicted of choking. I'm sorry, strangulation, was convicted on that. But the victim, she tried to pull that case. She didn't want it to move forward. Is that how that worked?
Yes, and we see that a lot in the research. You see that a lot where for a lot of, and if you ask our victims assistance coordinator who talks with every one of these victims, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, strangulation related, we reach out to them and offer services and talk to them and help them through the criminal justice system is kind of scary, and help them through that all the way up to the court and the testimony, and we coach them along the way. But when we reach out to them, the financial reasons, the reasons why they say I'm not going to cooperate, I'm stable here financially. I've got kids that I got to think about, and how's all this going to look? And I can't imagine how scary that is for that person. Yeah. But when you go and they drop that charge, then there's not a conviction. That person hadn't been held accountable, so they may do this multiple times. There's it's very underreported, so it may have happened multiple times, and we've had one call on it. And for us to do the best we can each and every time we're out there, to do everything we can to present a case, not only to help the survivor, medically, educational wise, but to hold that defender accountable. That's our goal here.
Jim, I definitely want to thank you for the time that you spent with us. I mean, can't imagine what it's like for this little city of Burleson, to be kind of picked out and somebody come in and just kind of let us know that we're making a difference. With everything that happened with Gabby, we had a lot of talks today, and you kind of had a lot of hindsight as 2020 on a lot of stuff. When it comes to parents that are that have kids that are getting into these early relationships, what would you say to some parents? What would the advice be to them about domestic violence, about paying attention to things that you may kind of, you and I kind of talked about earlier, kind of that spider sense tingling type of things. What are some of the things that you would wish you could tell somebody now that you kind of wish somebody had told you back then?
So a lot of times there's a lot of stigma around domestic violence, and they're trying to change some of the terminology and using terms like domestic abuse, because it doesn't always start out as physical. And I think a lot of times people have that misconception that it's always physical violence. It's not. And there are a lot of signs to look for. And people also have to know that this happens to anyone and everyone. Yeah. It's not just one demographic of people over another. It happens to everyone. It doesn't matter your socioeconomical status, your age, religious affiliation. It happens to everyone. And the numbers are staggering, and the numbers are going in the wrong direction for domestic violence. And we're actually finding that it's happening in younger and younger generations as kids are starting to have, I call them kids, but as teenagers, whatever, are starting to develop these relationships. There's a lot of unhealthy trends that are starting to see in younger generations that are red flags. And so right off the bat, the things to look out for are some love bombing type activity, or this is too good to be true, or this person's becoming your whole world and making it as though that you need me in your life, I'm the only person for you. Right. And love bombing is just continual, just over gifting and over the top, and it just seems like you're on cloud nine and everything is perfect. And that's a sign I think a lot of people miss. And then the next one really to start to look for is that isolation. Is that person wanting to spend all of their time with your kid or with that partner, keeping them away from family and drawing them away from friends and starting to talk badly about the friends where, the friends are troublemakers or, they're trying to break us up, trying to break them away from the people that will notice that something's not right. So just looking out for those signs. And, one thing is like love shouldn't hurt, and nobody should ever make you feel bad about yourself. And if somebody's making you feel bad right off the bat about yourself or feeling guilty for something, that's not your fault. Like those are all things you want to really look out for.
Right.
But really just paying attention and talking about having those tough conversations, talking about boundaries with each other, what's respectful, what's not. I think is really a way of doing it. I think if we can get to our younger generations, we will start to see a reduction in those numbers.
Absolutely.
We spoke a lot today about in society in general, we're very reactive. In the 911 world, we're reactive. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money into responding to the incident that occurred. But how much time are we spending on the prevention and education component and trying to prevent these incidents from ever happening?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a hard number to prove, because how am I going to prove it might take 3-5 years for those numbers to start to decline? And a lot of times we want to see that immediate change. But I think if we start getting to our youth with these healthy relationship programs and respectful relationships and talking about boundaries and having those tough conversations with our kids, we can start to affect a lot of change. And I think doing what you're doing here with this ordinance and your response to non-lethal strangulation and starting that training with your first responders, that right there is a way to prevent and educate them. So to prevent homicide by domestic violence via strangulation, to reduce that, to prevent that, and to educate them on all those dynamics is going to have a great outcome for survivors long-term, for the people that live here. And I think that's really what it's about. And that's why I was so amazed to see what was going on here. Cause I'm like, this is proactive, it's not like we had an incident and now we're going to react to that specific incident,
right,
change something. It was, no, we went to a training and we have this issue here. So I really think it's a lot of that, putting a lot of that together, getting our community involved. So even like this, just getting this information out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I truly believe this is not just a partnership of this weekend. I know that this is going to be something that you already spoken about, going out to other conferences and talking about this. And I know this is just the beginning. We thank you so much for being here. I know you made a statement earlier that really caught me. You were like, hey, I always dreamed about going out and being a speaker, about, being in the limelight, doing these types of things. And now I am. And it's almost like the worst thing for the worst reason ever. I'd take it all back. But what you're doing in the midst of the tragedy that you and your family faced, we couldn't ask for someone and a group of people that are doing better to reach out, not only to the next generation, but the generation now. The amount of people that we've spoken to about the strangulation ordinance, about domestic violence, I can't tell you the amount of people that pull us off to the side and they're like, let me tell you my story. And it's staggering the amount of people out there that have been touched in one way or another with domestic violence. And so getting the word out, spreading the word, continuing that education and getting those conversations, not only in our homes, but in our society, open and it not be something that's scary and not be something that we're all afraid to talk about, but to be out in the open with it. This is where it starts. So
absolutely. And I think those tough conversations need to happen more often. We're talking about domestic violence, even mental health. It's another thing we don't talk about very often, but just starting to have those real tough conversations and say, hey, this isn't a private issue. No, this is a very public issue. It affects us on so many levels, and it affects everyone. We couldn't sit back and not do anything. Gabby had a huge platform of help, and not everybody has that. And so if there's any way we can help anyone anywhere, we have the ability to do it, we're going to do it. And that's where we are. And I want to thank you guys for hosting me here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's nice to see what you all have going on here. And I never thought I would be speaking about anything like this. So my goal was to be on some fire department circuit conference somewhere talking about, I don't know, the latest ram shaft or whatever,
Right.
thing that we have. And like, this is great. But this is an important topic. And, if this is where we're meant to be, then this is where we'll be. And we'll be doing it for as long as we can until hopefully they put us out of business because they don't need us anymore.
Hey, it'd be a good business to have to go out of. So,
100%.
Jim, thank you again, Chief. I appreciate you showing up for this and the work that you're doing. So if you are someone that has been touched by domestic violence, if you're in the midst of that pain or that hurt, and you need someone to reach out to, there will be links in the comment section that help you in this area. But we'll also put the national links if you're seeing this from outside the Burleson area. Again, we thank you for being here tonight, and we'll see you later. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Chief.
Yeah.